Wireless LAN Professionals Podcast, episode 124.
Wireless LAN Professionals is a place to educate, inform, encourage, and entertain those involved in wireless LANs. This Wireless LAN Professionals podcast is an audio manifestation of these goals. Our host is a wireless LAN veteran, consultant, designer, and teacher, Keith Parsons. And now, the podcast for wireless LAN professionals by wireless LAN professionals.
Hello, this is Keith Parsons again. This is Wireless LAN Professionals Podcast, and today I have Tom Carpenter of CWNP with me. Hello, Tom.
Hey, it's good to be here today.
I thought it would be a good chance for our podcast audience to hear you talk a little bit about the new 107 CWNA. But before we get on there, we just got back from Orlando with a couple weeks ago, and the Wi-Fi Trek was down there. Tell me about your feelings about how Wi-Fi Trek went and the feeling that you got from the people there.
I think it was a really good event. It gave us the opportunity to communicate with a lot of people. This year, I was more free to have a lot of one-on-one conversations with individuals, which was phenomenal. And we got a lot of very good feedback. And by that, I don't mean that people were patting us on the back. I mean, we got the valuable feedback that we need to improve the program overall, to make CWNP better, to make all of our certifications better. And that is just super valuable to us. In addition, I think we had the opportunity to communicate what we're passionate about and what we're trying to do, and to reassure everyone that we're on their side. We want their certifications to be very valuable. And so we want to manage the organization in such a way that that value is maintained. And so the big thing is we want to go to the next level. CWNP certifications have been very valuable for a long time from a knowledge acquisition perspective, meaning that they give you the knowledge that you need to be a phenomenal wireless LAN engineer. But what we want to do is go to the next level where you're still getting that, but you're also getting the value of holding that certification. So the certification itself actually is bringing extra value to your career just because you hold the credential. And that's all about, of course, building awareness out there beyond the wireless industry. The human resources folks need to know about our certifications. They need to understand the value that they bring from a knowledge perspective, and therefore begin to demand those and request those of job candidates and so forth. So that's our passion and mission for the next 5 years, is to really go to that next level with the certifications, maintaining the value, but also going to the next level of value so it's more than just the knowledge.
Sounds like a good plan. I like working that way. A little history from years ago. Novell had a program called CNE, Certified Novell Engineer, for a while, and they at one point in time it was in high demand because at the time if you wanted to resell or use Novell you need a CWNE, a CNE, and there was a Wall Street Journal want ad that said BS in double E and 5 years experience or CNE. And that's the kind of thing, if we can get something like that for CWNA, CWAPs, it would help, so that people see it as valuable or more valuable as something getting a degree. So
Exactly.
Well, for the conference, you had boot camps. How'd those turn out?
They actually went really good. Of course, as you know, we had the opportunity to have evaluations post-conference so we could get the feedback from people. Everybody loved all of the trainers that presented there. It was, of course, you, Peter McKenzie, Robert Bartz, and myself teaching the 4 different courses that we offered. And the feedback was excellent. I think we probably saw one of the largest groups of people attending CWNP only training classes all in one place in a while. I was surprised at the total number.
It was quite a crowd. And I was very impressed. Just shout out to Robert Bartz and bringing his testing center on site. I took a test. He was professional, easy to work with, made it very easy to go in and take a test while you're at a conference. Additionally, we got really high pass rates from our courses. So those boot camps did really well for prepping people to actually pass the exam. I don't know about your class, but my class did really well.
Yeah, well, it does help, Keith, to have some of the best trainers in the world teaching them. So,
Well, yeah, a little bit, but I think it's also something I've been trying to tell my students for years. You're no better prepped than the last day of class, because you've just had hours and hours and hours of focused thinking and studying and talking, and it's all in your head. You're not going to get any better 2 weeks later.
that's true. So it definitely helps to be able to take that exam right after training.
So it was good stuff. Kudos on the site. The audio visual is, well, I'll bet the weird thing with the clickers. My clicker works everywhere. It just didn't work on that stage. But the backdrop was wonderful. The video guy did a good job. The audio did a good job. The layout was great. Very professional signage everywhere. So kudos to your team. You did a good job of making it look like a very professional conference.
They definitely did very well, and I have to give all the credit to all of the administrative staff, because this year I was phenomenally gifted with just being able to show up. So they did a really good job.
And you didn't have to MC. We got UC to do it.
Exactly.
And I don't think everyone quite. There are some people sitting around me who are not from the States or don't watch Netflix and know anything about Mr. Robot. So they're like, why does he keep putting that mask on? For those who got it, it was very a geeky thing to do. It was great.
Yeah. We had a good time.
It was a good conference. So thank you much. Now on to, you gave a presentation there about the whole state of the CWNP program, but let's focus now on just the 107. You gave the course. There's a new book available. So tell us where 107 is, what it includes, and what we can expect to see in both the exam and the course materials.
Absolutely. So CWNA 107, of course, is the next iteration of our flagship certification that's been with the program since the beginning. And this version really was a complete overhaul from a courseware perspective, because it had evolved over the years. And early on, back in the 11BGA days, there was just a really simplified set of PHYs that you had to worry about. And then along came 802.11n. And so when the course was updated to cover 11n, the way it was updated was by saying, well, let's add a chapter to talk about 802.11n. And then 11AC came along, and there were some enhancements to include some coverage about 802.11ac, and the old chapter that was called 802.11n was renamed to Modern PHYs. And so what happened is we said, let's go back and let's integrate this. And therefore, when we talk about PHYs, we talk about the 802.11 physical layers. So we deal with 11n, 11ac, 11b, g, and a. They're all still in there, but we, of course, are not focusing as heavily on those simply because they are no longer the PHY that at least we hope we're using in the majority of deployments. And then we also look forward and we cover some of the less known physical layers and MAC functionality as well, dealing with TVHT, S1G, DMG, some of these other enhancements to 802.11 that have come over the last 4 or 5 years, and include them from an awareness perspective. So letting people know what they offer, what they do, and so forth. So all of that's been integrated, and that's probably one of the biggest changes in the courseware itself, so that the courseware is focused on end-to-end teaching the concepts rather than having to go back and revisit concepts a little bit later on in a dedicated chapter to something like 802.11n.
So it kind of flows better.
Yeah, it does. It flows better. And of course, some things, they'll always be the same, Keith. So we've got stuff that it's pretty much the same basic concepts that it was in the very first CWNA. Reflection, still reflection, diffraction, still diffraction, scattering, and so on. So the RF behaviors and functionalities and understanding frequencies and wavelengths and antenna functionality and et cetera, most of it foundationally remains the same as 106 and even 105 and others before it. So in that area, there is not as much new to learn. In the area of antennas, sure, we have to deal with MIMO nowadays, and we didn't have to 11 or 12 years ago. And we also may deal with some new enhancements to antenna design. But by and large, antennas are still antennas, RF is still RF. So, as we say, physics doesn't change. And so, therefore, physics is still physics and RF is still RF. But the areas where there are really significant changes in CWNA 107 is in what you might call the link to the professional level certifications. So security has been whittled down a little more even than we did with 106. So we've pulled a little more security out of it and left it for CWSP. There's security there. It's important for the administrator to know about the different security options and how those are configured and how they function at a basic level and so forth. But just to give you an idea, the four-way handshake, which of course got a lot of press right after the conference, right, with crack, even though it was hyped press, but it still got a lot of press. So the four-way handshake is a really good example of an area where we have simplified things a lot at the CWNA level. You would never have to know for the exam that the term nonce even exists, much less where it's used in the four-way handshake. All you need to understand is that the four-way handshake does involve 4 messages, and that those messages are used to transfer information that allows for the localized generation of encryption keys, and those messages allow for the transfer of the group encryption key. And that's in a nutshell, a little more detail than that, but what you need to know about the four-way handshake. So it's been greatly simplified while conserving or reserving the details of the four-way handshake for CWSP.
That leads me to the next question on, you added these things into 107. What did you have to take out? Or how did you shuffle things around between the new TWS, AP, NP, the whole gamut? It's not merely just adding more into 107.
Exactly. In fact, the course book is smaller than 106 was. So it has been reduced by about 100 pages in the print version of the course book over what the 106 course book was. So that surprises a lot of people when they hear it. They say, wait a minute, we added new stuff and yet it's smaller. Well, the reason is, first of all the old stuff is just history, completely history. So frequency hopping, spread spectrum, and WEP for security and these kinds of things, they're mentioned.
No PCF?
Well, there is a slide that actually has it on there, but indicates that we do not use it and it's not tested on. Because it's just a graphic that lists all the different contention algorithms that are available in the 802.11 standard. So there's that, but that's it. And the purpose of the slide is actually to introduce EDCA, and that's what the actual focus is there. So I wish I could give you what you want and say PCF isn't in there at all, but it did sneak in, but only from that perspective. So there's no coverage of it and no testing on it.
and that makes sense. I mean, it did exist. It just didn't have to be tested on it.
Exactly.
But then again, that was old folks have to think about that. So you took some stuff out. How does it reshuffle? I mean, did some, like you said, some went up to SP, more the details? What about DP and AP? Details also move as well?
Absolutely. In fact, in CWNA, when we were doing the job task analysis, and there were 10 or 11 of us involved in that process earlier in the year, we were looking at what does a network administrator do, specifically a wireless network administrator. And one of the key things we said is, they're not necessarily the ones that are going to design the entire wireless network and even performing a site survey for the purpose of design. So we had to step back from the site survey topic that was in CWNA and ask, what should it be focused on? And what the group determined was that the focus really should be on validation surveys, the ability to validate that the wireless network is meeting the specifications that we need it to meet. And so while there is a chapter on site survey in the CWNA 107 courseware, for example, and there are objectives, if you look close at those objectives, they're telling you that you need to know how to perform a post-validation survey. And there's really not anything there that says you have to know how to do wall attenuation measurements or anything like that. All that is left for CWDP. How to use something like Ekahau or IB Wave to do an actual design is reserved for CWDP. So all of that has been removed from CWNA from the perspective of actually designing the network. There is some in the courseware reminding you about the requirements gathering process and that it's important to have the right requirements. But on the actual objectives and on the actual exam, you're tested on you have the ability to validate that a wireless LAN meets the specified requirements, whatever those were. And that's really the focus there. And then from the AP perspective, of course, protocol analyzers and spectrum analyzers are still covered in CWNA, but at fairly light coverage. And the real emphasis of knowing how to use these tools in detail is reserved for the CWAP. And of course, there's some troubleshooting in CWNA. In fact, as an example, the current CWAP introduced the concept of a troubleshooting methodology. That has been pulled down into CWNA, and it's a focus there. And then in the new CWAP that will be released next year, it's just assumed knowledge that anyone at that level already understands the need for a process that they would utilize in troubleshooting. And so it leaves us all of that time and all of that extra space in CWAP to be covering more in-depth analysis, troubleshooting, and those kinds of things.
Well, good to hear. So you taught the course. It was kind of unfair because it was a 3-day version rather than a 4-day. How was that as an instructor? Did the flow work? You thought obviously for months about the changes. You had a chance to teach it live. How'd that turn out?
I think the flow went really well. It definitely was not enough time. I was the one person that went to 6 o'clock every day or within a minute or two of it. And then on the last day, I think I was 5 or 6 minutes late actually to finish off the last couple of slides. So it was definitely not enough time to teach it in 3 days, but given the more time of 4.5 to 5 days that most of the learning centers use, I think it'll work well there. Now, I say it's not enough time. Obviously, it can be taught, but you have to leave out some of the things you'd like to do, like spending some time allowing them to work with configuration of devices and even possibly looking at some protocol captures at certain points when you're talking about different concepts like authentication and association and so forth. But the time's just not there to pause and do those kinds of lab exercises. And so the normal time span will be better, but certainly if you have 3 days, you can get it done. It's just you better be focused and you better know exactly what you need to be focusing on, where you need to be going into more depth and so forth. And, I had a great mixture in the class. I had people that really had very little experience with wireless and some that had already taken CWNA in the past and they were really only there because they wanted to become a CWNT in the future, or they're already a CWNT and they wanted to just sit the class to get the experience. And, everybody without exception from the entire range said that the course gave them some value, not just being there for the purpose of being a CWNT, but actually they had the opportunity to learn some new things or learn them from a different perspective, which is always good. I know myself, I like to sit and listen to someone teach something I already know in depth because there's going to be something that they know that I don't. They're going to present it in a way that I wouldn't, and it's going to give me even more enlightenment. So I think I enjoyed it overall.
Well, good feedback on the course. How about the exam? Obviously, there was people there. They had a chance to sit the exam. I heard good things from people passing. What was your reaction on the new exam and the feedback from the people at the conference? Yeah,
I had a lot of feedback from people that were in my class that were coming up to me, letting me know they had passed the exam if they had and so forth. And then there were a couple of people that took the exam that didn't sit the class and they just wanted to kind of take the exam raw and see how it went. And it was interesting. One of those individuals did let me know that they failed the exam by one question, and the other one said they passed it by one question. So it was interesting for those cold cases that went in and sat the exam without any real prep material, which kind of made me feel good because they already had their CWNA from the 106 exam. And they just said, hey, I've got a free test here. I'll go ahead and take the 107 test. They didn't want to take a professional level cert. So it felt good that when you look at a couple of those that really should have already known a lot of the information that they either barely failed or barely passed, it makes you feel comfortable with the location of where the exam actually is in that case. Now, someone going through the class, you would hope that they would be able to pass it at a little bit of a higher rate, honestly, especially if they're sitting with someone who's been developing materials and working with it for the past 6 months leading up to that event. And most of them did. So that was a good thing as well.
So you said there's a new student book that go from basically the slides with notes. Is there also going to be an updated 107 book. I get always confused when I call them study guides because you think the slide decks are study guides too.
Yeah. So it's funny because I was just putting together an internal glossary for CWNP employees last week, and we do have two different terms we use internally. We use the term study guide and course guide. And the course guide is the slides with notes, and then the study guide is the book. And we do have our book. It has gone through some final edits based on feedback from the training class. And that is at the printers and is going to be shipping here in the next week or so with all the orders that are coming in. I also understand that Cybex is updating their book, and I believe you may have heard as well, but I believe it's January, February timeframe when that book's coming out for 107.
Well, Coleman called out Westcott and said maybe if he gets his rearing gear and finishes his chapters.
Okay, so the good news is there will be two study guides for it.
I was just reinforcing Coleman's, where's Westcott? He should be writing his book. Though Westcott did come out with a great Aruba book, so kudos to him for that. But we want the new CWNA 107 book too. It's nice to have options that you can either get the Certitrack version or the one from Cybex. Well, great. You also gave a presentation about the future. I don't know if everyone's watched your webinar on this, but could you just give us a couple-minute overview of what happened to CWTS? Where is it now? And the change and the reason behind it, and why we have 2 new courses and exams.
Sure. So the big change there is CWTS is going to be going away at the end of 2018. So people can take the CWTS exam through the end of 2018. There are no changes to the objectives. It'll be the same exam and so forth. And the reason for such an extensive allowance in that is because there are a lot of companies that actually use CWTS training internally, and we wanted to give them a little better than a year to transition. So what we've done is based on feedback from the community saying that CWTS is too technical for some and not technical enough for others. And in that, in other words, they just need to go on to CWNA. So we did our surveys, we did our communications with the business side as well as several wireless LAN engineers. And what we found was that there was a need for a couple of different smaller certifications. One that I've been summarizing lately by saying, you know how to speak Wi-Fi. And another one, you can do basic installs of wireless equipment if you have specifications. So someone gives you a design document that says, here's where the AP should be mounted, and here's how the AP should be configured. So you can go in and install and configure that AP. That's the CWT. So CWS is you can speak Wi-Fi and understand what people are talking about when they talk about Wi-Fi. And it's great for salespeople, marketing people, possibly help desk professionals and so forth. And then CWT is really aimed at that install tech, which ranges from your installers in the consumer space that go out and install cable modems with built-in wireless devices. So rather than having to leave it at the whims of a bad algorithm that tries to pick a channel, they could actually design it for the customer the way they need it to function. And going all the way through to people who are assistants, if you will, to folks like yourself who you go out and design a mass deployment. And then you may need to hire some people that are just going to help you mounting APs and doing some basic tasks, but they really don't have the knowledge and skills to design the wireless network. And they may not even have the abilities to do full-scale administration of the network, but they can do those install tech kind of tasks. And so that's really what those two are targeted at. They'll be replacing CWTS long-term. Now, I want to reemphasize that CWTS, the exam can be taken until the end of next year, and it's very important to know it will be a lifetime certification, so we will validate that all the way through. CWS and CWT are 3-year certifications, and there's really nothing that will renew them. So if someone wanted the CWS and just wanted to maintain it, they would need to retake the CWS again every 3 years. The choice there is if someone feels the need to go on to CWNA, they're on a new track now. And the goal there would be that if they go beyond CWNA, they're going into the various professional level certs and possibly all the way to CWNE.
Well, that's a good feedback of where things are, and those CWS and CWT are available now.
That's correct.
Courses, books, study guides. Let me say them the right way. course guides and study guides?
Within the week, there will be pages up at the CWNP website where they can be purchased. The products are ready. We're just getting the website created to be able to purchase those.
I will say that's now then, because by the time this podcast hits the air, they'll be ready to go.
Excellent.
Tom, thank you for your time today. It was good getting a little information about one. We talked a little bit about Wi-Fi Trek and how successful it was and the things that were good there. Talked about the new CWNA 107 and the CWT and CWS, and some of the things you're changing with the S and P as they're coming into the future. No promises on time, but I like the idea of moving some of the things down into NA and some of the things up into SP and the way you're making the changes. So thank you.
Absolutely. Glad to be here.
Divergent Dynamics with Devin Aiken.
Devin Aiken, if you have the ability to adjust CCA thresholds, why and when would you want to apply these levers? Is there ever value?
So yes, there is value, but it is not in many environments. And the biggest problem with adjusting the CCA threshold, that is receive sensitivity threshold, is another way of looking at that or talking about that. If you have that ability, the biggest problem you're going to run into is the lack of knowledge of how to use it. So today, the way Wi-Fi works is that as part of the clear channel assessment process, there's two components. We call it signal detect and energy detect, or sometimes we call it carrier sense and energy detect. But whether you want to call it carrier sense or signal detect, either way, this first check of signal detect is looking for other Wi-Fi signals, whether it's the one that you're looking for in particular, or something that's destined to you, or it's destined to something else. If you can decode it, that falls into the signal detect arena. And by default, of course, each client has a different receive sensitivity. And by default, this is going to, the receive sensitivity on being able to decode a Wi-Fi signal is about 4 dB SNR. 4 dB SNR, which is a tiny, tiny, tiny signal, even if your receiver is not very sensitive. Like a 1x111N phone would be very not sensitive in comparison to a 3x311 AC laptop. But even still, it can detect minute signals down in the sub-picowatt range. So in those cases, in the normal use case, rather, the whole point is if I can detect somebody else transmitting, I back off, and this prevents a lot of collisions. So when we start messing with this CCA tuner value, this threshold value, what happens is we are deafening a receiver, the AP in specific, because that's where the adjustment's going to be. We are deafening that AP. So what may actually be decodable, we're telling it not to decode. And when you tell it not to decode, you're giving it permission, in depending on the threshold you use, to transmit over the top of somebody else's transmission, which then, depending on the circumstances, could cause collisions, then retransmissions, then use up airtime unnecessarily, and it just snowballs. So when you're adjusting this, you need to be careful in how quickly you adjust it. So if we're starting out at 4 dB SNR and we assume a noise floor of, let's say, neg 92, then that means a neg 88 is detectable and decodable. So if we change this down to, neg 85, we need to see if our throughput is getting better across the enterprise or getting worse. Is there more collisions, more retransmissions or not? And then we want to adjust it, 1 dB or 2 dB at a time if we possibly can, depending on what the vendor gives us, as controls. Be very conservative in your adjustment of this. But what this gives us, if applied properly, is the ability to have more simultaneous transmissions, therefore more capacity in a high density or very high density reuse scenario. We can have two APs, for example, on the same channel that can ignore each other when it's appropriate to do so. Like one, a client of AP1 is hearing AP1 great, but the AP1 thinks AP2 is so far off that he doesn't think it's going to be a problem for him to detune and transmit right over this AP2, so that client one may hear both, but it's okay. The AP has decided that's going to be acceptable. And in those cases, when it is acceptable, it's a good value for increasing capacity in VHD environments. But it is a very, very sensitive adjustment and can cause as much problems when misadjusted as it might give you value in a well-adjusted scenario.
10 Talks.
So, for CWNEs, we have a couple here. By the way, how many people in the room are CWNE? Good job. Yay, I like seeing more and more of those. So, first, Troy, what's your number?
Number 90.
Renee?
187.
You said 97?
187.
87.
Sir.
Hey,
Yes.
make it better.
Yes.
Raj, you said 15?
15.
All right. Raj, what was your path to CWNE? How did you get started and why did you go there?
Yeah, I started my career in wireless LAN in 2002 as a support engineer. I was supposed to troubleshoot wireless LAN NIC cards and access points. My first call was so bad, the customer hung up, and my team lead gave me a good word of mouth. So I took that as an inspiration and started my CWNA course, and I completed that in 10 months. And right after finishing the course, I became the subject matter expert there. So as I started completing these certifications, my career path also grew. I moved from a support engineer to a pre-sales and post-sales architect. And then I moved on as a QA engineer. So I kept on doing these certifications, and it gave me a good career path. And from a QA engineer, I became an engineering manager. And from there, now a product manager. I got my CWNE in 2006. And definitely I have to make a mention of Devin. So at those times, he used to call it like the triple certification holders, right? CWNA, CWAP, and the SP. If you have these three certifications, you qualify for a CWNE. Since we are associated with the program for a long time, we were like the lucky lottery winners. We didn't have to go through the process, but during those times, we didn't have enough material available on the net, so we need to have hands-on experience to get the certification.
Yeah, enough material. We had nothing. Good. Renee?
Well, working at a school district in Utah, in the U.S., we started with vendors coming and installing stuff. Initially with Zeros, putting those big flying saucers up in the hallways, and having a lot of problems. And we, along the way, met with Mr. Parsons through Jared Griffith. And we took some classes with Air Magnet and then some CWNA. It only took me like 4 years to take my first CWNA. And I saw the need for the training, and I just got tired of being held hostage by vendors coming to the school and showing us green maps and like, see, it's green, like, yeah, it's still not working. And I said, like, we're gonna just do this in-house. And I started with the CWNA, and then of course later along the way we took the Air Magnet and then learned about ECHO. And I actually initially translated a class for Mr. Parsons in Madrid, in Spain, and then another one in Mexico, and then like kind of started, getting addicted to Wi-Fi and the teaching part, the sharing knowledge, and saw the need also for just pursuing the CWNE, and started taking the other texts and the exams. And it seemed like it was like a 4-month period that I was just doing nothing but studying for those, and that's how I became a CWNE.
Okay, Troy?
I guess back in 2001, I bought my first PCM CIA wireless card. It was a Cisco card, and I was still going to university. And I was walking up and down hallways, measuring the signal strength and the quality. So I just had this access graph. And so it was kind of sort of quasi doing site surveys, I guess, at that time. But I got hooked on wireless. But I started off my career more on the routing, switching, the networking side, the wired-based side. I worked for large ISPs up in Canada. But I'd go home and I'd do packet captures at night. And so finally, I just decided I wanted to make Wi-Fi and working with wireless networks my full-time gig. So I left that company and went to work in a professional services environment deploying Wi-Fi mesh networks in the industrial space. So I did that for a long time. And then I told you guys about the explosion. So I moved more into the enterprise, more conference center type space. And I guess with my CWNE, I'm a bit of a certification junkie, sort of similar to Keith. I'd kept it on my radar for a long time. I always knew that the CWNE is where I wanted to go. But I paced myself, wrote all the wireless tests and exams. To be upfront with you guys, it took me 2 attempts to get my CWNA. It took me a while to kind of wrap my head around where the material was and the concepts they were trying. But I knew what my goal was. So the perseverance paid off, and eventually I got there.
Question for the audience. How many of you have ever failed an exam? Okay.
Which exam?
Any exam. Happens all the time, guys. I get a lot of people who are like, well, I studied, I took your class, but I'm afraid of taking the test. Take the dang test. You fail. That's life. I think for a season I was running slightly over 50% passes. Because why would you want to take too many, study too hard?
I have a follow-up question. Who was paying to take those tests? Yourself or somebody else?
It was always myself. I've never had anyone pay for any of my exams.
Those are plenty of expensive lessons.
They're not expensive lessons. They're cheap because my time's worth more than the study time. I can make way more money per hour doing work than I can studying. So if I have to waste 4 hours studying just to do something, I can earn more money than the test. I would think most of you make more money per hour working than you do the cost of studying. So, okay, next question on the list. Have you ever mentored anyone?
Yeah,
And
several.
are you doing it today?
Yes, whenever I find a guy who wants to start on wireless, I buy a book to him. I buy a CWNE book to him, and he gets started from there. And several. I mentored several like that.
Troy.
I've attempted to mentor some people and take them under my wing. I tried to encourage them to come to the Wi-Fi side, but in their hearts, they were data center guys. But I'd share so I have a collection of books, but I'd give them free books and hey, read this book from Matthew Gast. Take a read at that, get hooked. But sometimes I find in our industry we get a little blinded. We think that Wi-Fi is the end all and be all, but there's a lot of different technologies out there. But being supportive, it's shocking, I know. Being supportive and giving them the freedom to kind of learn and make mistakes. And then coach them after those mistakes and kind of give them guidance, I think goes a long way in helping to mentor.
Would you be willing to mentor anyone else?
Yeah, absolutely.
Anyone who wants a mentor? We have people right here willing to help out. Fernand?
Yes, sir. You heard me mention Minions, and those are my high school interns. We used to start with those kids from high school and say, hey, you want a summer job that is not flipping burgers? And they'll come and do technology with us, cabling and Wi-Fi. And I started mentoring those, and several of those turned into good Wi-Fi guys. And also mentoring my guys at the school district when I was there, and fellow IT professionals in the other school districts. And some of my students throughout in Latin America and Mexico, I had a few, and in the UK, I had a couple others. Helping others is something we do. We're a community. We're like a family. And sometimes it's after work, you're tired, and you just want to do nothing. You don't want to talk about technology, but that's when you can talk to somebody. And I mentor, and I will keep doing it.
So if you're not where you want to be, strongly recommend, one, if you don't have a blog, write a blog. That's just no excuse for not writing a blog. If you need help on your blog, people will help you mentor on the blog. Great. If you had to give one piece of advice to a newbie just entering into the industry, what would you tell them?
Find where your passion is. Follow what gets you excited, what gets you out of bed, so that when you go to work, obviously, hopefully you're making money doing that, but it's something you enjoy, so that you don't see it as a daily grind. Just be excited, whether that's Wi-Fi, data center, writing articles for the newspaper, or whatever you want, just whatever you're excited about.
Renee?
I would say volunteer. That's I've done that a lot. Find somebody. I think in one of the presentations they mentioned just find gigs where you can just go and shadow somebody and try to learn that way. But study a lot. There's the exams. They can help you. That doesn't mean you're an expert. You pass an exam, big deal. Anybody can study and pass an exam. But that's part of it. That's how you prove that you have learned something. So I would say, study hard. It's better to sit down and watch football or watch whatever you like to do. But if you really want to start like doing Wi-Fi, just work hard, study hard, and try to pursue some certifications and some volunteering work.
Yeah, the newbie should just believe that everything is possible. If he wants to become an expert, he can become an expert. If he wants to become a management professional, he can become. So it's all about the self-belief that we need to have, that we will be able to do anything and everything that we want to achieve. Certifications definitely help take us to our goals.
They're kind of mile markers, mileposts along the way, more than a destination by themselves.
Yeah. It's a moving target.
So what's next for you? You achieved your CWNE. Where are you going next?
I've done CWNE, then I did PMP, I did CSPO, SAFE PMPO. I keep, it's just not the technical stuff. I cut across the management layer as well. So, management stuff too.
It is a layer.
So it again depends on like what is the need. If there is a need for me to focus on SDN, and SDN is what's the upcoming thing in the market, I would focus there, enrich my knowledge so that
my question is, what is next for you?
I think it should be SDN.
SDN, okay. Renee?
I don't know. Honestly, I don't have like, I do have in mind like some either Aruba or certifications, but it's just, you get so busy on your daily job that, sometimes you kind of lose focus of that, but you keep working towards that unknown. And I don't have a specific certification that I'm looking for next. CWNE, becoming a CWNE didn't make me smarter. The next day I felt like, I feel the same. It's just that you have like more weight.
But you had so much more respect.
Well, that's true. And but I don't see it that way. It's like the more you know, the more you move in this industry, the more you realize you don't know. And I do see what's next for me, I guess, is I've been studying more to become a better CWNE. Becoming a CWNE doesn't make you an expert. It's just, that's the title. Yeah, it gives you respect in the industry, but we have to keep learning. So that's my next.
Troy, I know this is near and dear to your heart. What's next? What's the plan?
So I mentioned I'm a bit of a certification junkie, and I know there's some of us in the room here that go down that path. So I've had long-term goals for many years. So I have my CCIE wireless, my Aruba DX, the CWNE. So I've been following that path for a long time. And now I've sort of run out of certifications. Also, I work for one of the vendors, so it kind of limits me on how many other certifications I can pursue.
They kind of don't want to see another one. So Ruckus certification's not in your future.
It makes it more challenging to go after something like that. But I have found an interesting challenge now is kind of pursuing the training and teaching path. So I have been kind of working towards earning the ability to teach the CWNT courses. I also teach the AeroHive courses, but I think teaching's been a good outlet kind of to pass on some information, the war stories that I have, and kind of provide that information back through classes.
Okay, Fernay, final question of the night. Afternoon.
Yes, sir.
Depends on what time zone we're in. Whenever you're watching this, it could be morning for you. 2018, what's going to happen with Wi-Fi? Your predictions for 2018's Wi-Fi.
Can you have somebody answer first? Can I call a friend or 50-50?
Phone a friend. Oh.
2018, well, everybody's, I guess, looking forward to AX and making 2.4, not as scary as it is today to design. I don't know, I guess just always trying to improve Wi-Fi. And one of my personal goals for 2018 is, train many more wireless professionals and share the knowledge. That's what's going to happen to Wi-Fi in my life.
Raj, 2018 for you.
Yeah, I think I have to simply. Predictions. Oh, my predictions? Yeah.
So where's 2018?
.11ax is going to come in, and initially for a year or two, it may not work, and it will take. I'm sure, like MU-MIMO was on the same path, so
MU-MIMO still doesn't work.
It still doesn't work. That's what I'm saying, right? So it's a new buzzword. And I hear that it has a lot of potential, but until we actually test it and experience it, we can't believe.
Troy.
Similar to what's mentioned, I think AX is going to take over the headlines next year. I suspect, my understanding is it won't be ratified until later the year, but I think we'll have pre-11AX hit the market. We're already seeing pre-11AX hit the market. So the real question is whether the client devices will catch up to the infrastructure. So there'll be ongoing debate there. But I see IoT will continue to take off. And so we think we have a lot of devices connected to the network now. We're going to see that increase tenfold, I think, with IoT devices, which will primarily, as we've heard many times in the last couple of days, be connecting on 2.4. So be ready for that. Not a lot of bandwidth being driven, but a large number of devices trying to connect.
Thanks. And just as we end, something you learned at WLPC this year.
I learned a lot from the Odroid class, and from every session that I listened to, I learned something. But the Odroid class sticks to my head because as an expert, I thought, okay, fine, I knew everything, but I didn't know few tools that Keith was using. And also Keith had tested 15 Proxim cards, and he found that the RSSI levels kept varying. Okay, that was an eye-opener for me. I never thought that could happen with client devices. I know that the RSSI values will fluctuate between devices of different vendors, but not from the same vendor.
Good.
That's my
thing you learned.
I think that one thing that popped out to me is that we need to be a lot more flexible in our designs, where if we throw down, a strict, I need a neg 75 cell threshold boundary, as we saw through many of the site survey predictive modeling presentations and Keith's presentations, it's far from reality. So we need a better way of dealing with that and being more accurate in our models, but also being open to the fact that neg 65 isn't neg 65 for everything.
Renee?
I learned about wireless HART and e-paper. That's a kind of interesting concepts.
They might actually be able to merge together.
I know. So, and also through the conference that we've been at, we had another one in Colombia this year. We just keep seeing newcomers. People have never been to the conferences, and I've learned that every time when you think that pretty much everything has been presented, that all the topics have been covered, somebody else comes new, and they have different ideas, and they have new questions that some of the times make us wonder, about other things that we thought didn't exist. So see a community growing, and it's just more motivation for the future.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Wireless LAN Professionals Podcast, the podcast for wireless LAN professionals by wireless LAN professionals. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at Wireless LAN Pros for all the latest news and updates, and also connect directly with Keith on Twitter at Keith R. Parsons. Head over to www.wlanpros.com for this episode's show notes, as well as the latest in all things Wi-Fi.